Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your hosts, Jake and Scott. In this week's episode, we go to the far southwest in Arizona, and we're talking Whiskey Del Bac. You may be familiar with them from all the releases that they have done with Lost Lantern. That's how we got to know them. But today we're going to dive deep and we're going to understand what's happening in the hot, dry heat of Arizona. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of the Bourbon Lens. Mark Vierthaler, did I say it right? Vierthaler. See, the English Germanic language that we were loving on beforehand. Head distiller is joining us today. So Mark, we'll keep it at that from here on out. How are you this evening?
I am doing very well. I'm so glad we were able to connect. I know we had conflicting schedules and being adults with lots of things going on. So it's really great to be here. And I'm thankful to be sitting in air conditioning right now.
Oh, so. Yeah, I think we all are.
Yeah. You'll have a different type of heat. We've got that humid heat here that is crushing everyone's soul. You just have soul crushing heat. It's just different.
We're lucky enough right now. We're in what we call monsoon season, which is where the bulk of our moisture comes. So for whatever reason, Mother Nature decided 110 degree weather wasn't bad enough. From June until September, about once a day, we're going to dump 30 minutes of rainfall on you. We're going to knock that humidity up to about 50, 60% on top of 110. So,
ouch. Arizona's good just outside of the rest of the year. It's pretty damn good, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We came from the East Coast, my wife and I, when I took the job out here, and we were in Maryland. And I will take the 105 degree days with 10% humidity any day over a 90 day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, not fun. We get that here in the Ohio Valley. It's not great. And Scott, you get to go enjoy the swampy lands of Florida here in the next couple of weeks. So good luck.
Yeah, a couple of weeks. I was actually tempering myself because my air went out over the weekend. That was fun. The house gets up to like 80, 81. And I was like, it's creeping up there. Yeah. Luckily, then the sun set and it started to creep down 1 degree every 2 hours or so. But yeah, that was luckily a couple days. And shout out to the AC guy for sure coming on the weekend.
Yeah, those guys are busy now. The America. Yes, the America is getting torched with heat this year. And someone told me this. I haven't fact checked it yet, but there was an eruption in a volcano a couple years ago, and they expect temperatures to be about 10 to 20 degrees warmer over the next 5 years because of this eruption that happened. So any people who understand volcanic information want to fact check us, please do. This is, if you see it on X, Twitter, whatever, don't fight us. We secondhand information. But anyway, we're here to talk about whiskey. And Whiskey Del Bac is interesting. And the southwestern region of the country is interesting because, it's different than Texas, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, Texas Southwest. No, let's get right there. New Mexico and Arizona, that's Southwest. It's hot. It's hot all the time. What is the origin of Whiskey Del Bac? And I think that's one thing I don't necessarily know, and I think our listeners would be interested in, because we have talked about Santa Fe whiskey and what Colin has done there with the Colkegan. I'm interested to know what's happening a little bit further west and south of that, because Tucson is pretty darn southern.
Yeah, we're about 60 miles from the border, so we are pretty far southwest. Yeah, so Whiskey Del Bac's origin is actually really interesting. So this will be our 13th year in business as an American Single Malt whiskey producer, as a distillery. And we're the brainchild of our founder, Stephen Paul, and his wife, Elaine. Stephen and his wife owned a furniture shop here in Tucson for about 30 years called Arroyo Design. And they specialized in utilizing mesquite wood. And if anyone listening is not familiar with the mesquite tree, it is a very interesting bush/tree. It's very gnarled. It's very twisted, has a very distinctive look, and it is indigenous to the desert Southwest. It is also a very hard wood. Stephen in particular had an interest in harder woods, and a lot of the more beautiful, accessible ones tended to be rainforest wood, which he was not particularly comfortable working with. Stephen was born in Southern California, but raised in Tucson. And so as he started developing the work within the carpentry shop, he decided he was going to specialize in mesquite. And it is a beautiful, beautiful grain, but it's very difficult to work with. There's a lot of waste that's produced when you are making furniture with mesquite wood. And so what would happen is Stephen would take these mesquite scraps home and do what a lot of people do. You'd burn them in your fire pit. You would cook with them. I always make this joke. I'm contractually obligated to make this joke. He would take his mesquite scraps home. They would burn them, and he would tell Elaine, "There go our profits, up in smoke." Check mark. I have told the joke. But it was actually, this is what inspired Stephen to create Whiskey Del Bac. So Stephen and Elaine are both really big Scotch drinkers. They tend to like the Speysides, in particular the Macallan 12 was their go-to. And God, this would have been, I want to say like 2006-ish. One of the nights they are out smoking with mesquite and sipping on some single malt, and Elaine, looks at Stephen and says, "Hey, they utilize peat to dry malt in Scotland. Has anybody ever considered using mesquite to do that instead?" And Stephen's the type of guy that, once he gets this idea in his head, he's going to go for it. He's going to work towards it. And so he taught himself how to floor malt. He taught himself how to distill, and kind of just really became interested in this idea of creating a single malt whiskey that is of its place. One of the things that I always like to say is Whiskey Del Bac, we are a love letter to the Sonoran Desert. You'll get some people who will kind of bristle at the idea of terroir and whiskey. I think thankfully we're getting away from being against that, but creating that idea of, if you can create a product that is so distinct and so good and so of its place, you can have something that can rival Scotch, something that can rival the areas of Scotland that are so distinctive, something that can rival bourbon. And so he set out to start creating this single malt. He got himself a small little alembic still, started distilling, started making smaller versions of the product in the back of his wood shop. And around this time, his daughter Amanda had moved home from New York, and people in town were getting interested. The quality was going up, and they were like, okay, we should really make something of this. And so in 2011 is when Hamilton Distillers, which is our parent company, opened, and then we released Whiskey Del Bac. And so the very first product that came out is what we call our classic. Smoke is divisive. I know you guys have talked about it on this show. We have this conversation a lot with other whiskey drinkers, that while we were inspired by the idea of a mesquited single malt, Stephen really wanted to create something that was just a high quality product, and so he started with an unsmoked American single malt. We always like to say that we are either inspired by the Scottish model or we're riffing on the Scottish model. The conversation happens a lot with American single malt. You can really lean into the Scotch style and create something that is very much Scotch-like, or you can go hard into the paint with something that is distinctly American. And so that's what we do at Whiskey Del Bac. We do double copper pot distillation, 100% malted barley. We used to make all of our malt, our unsmoked malt. We do source both from the Pacific Northwest and just outside of Fort Worth, Texas. But we do make our smoked malt there in-house. And so 100% malted barley base, double copper pot. But we kind of break with tradition in as much as, one, we go into new American white oak, medium plus toast, number 3 char. And we also go into quarter casks. We're going into 15-gallon barrels. One of the things that we have the advantage of being in the desert Southwest is, one, we're dry, and 2, we have really aggressive temperature shifts. And so if you're conscientious, if you're paying attention to your production method, your fermentation, your distillation, you can create a new make that can go into these smaller format barrels, take advantage of these 30, 40 degree shifts in a single day, and you can create something that's really interesting and really complex in a much shorter amount of time. And so that really does create something that is very bold, but we feel is also very balanced and very accessible, and kind of treads that line between, what you would consider a traditional single malt, but even treading that line into something that a bourbon drinker could really find accessible.
No, I mean, when you think of the classic, right, it has some classic yeasty notes that I think people would love. There's a couple of distilleries that come to mind, or distillation pieces that come to mind, like Old Forester has a very distinct note. I feel like this yeast strain has a very distinct note. I get banana on it. Jack Daniels would be another one, right, in the same Brown-Forman family. So that was one of the big characteristics that I got, is like, hey, I can relate this to a bourbon already, right, in the classic. And so I thought that was the most important and interesting thing to me coming right out of it, because I was ready for that mesquite. Like I know what it's had. Like I've had Desert Dessert from, again, Lost Lantern, and that thing is, whoo boy, in your face. Yeah. And so Scott, like, what was your thought of the classic? Like, just I thought it tasted classic.
I mean, there's really not many other ways to put it. It almost confuses me for like a bourbon / rye. Like it has like some grain notes to it.
Yep.
But it has like a very traditional like vanilla undertone that just kind of like, it just rides, all the flavors just kind of ride on the vanilla. Yeah. You know, I do get the fruit. I don't know if I get banana, but it's kind of like it's almost like a candy fruit. I don't know what the word is, but like it's an ambiguous fruit. Like it's hard to pinpoint. It's just like kind of multiple fruits together.
I've always, and I'm with you guys. So like for me, I always get that big banana note, like that isoamyl acetate is like really, really up front. And I kind of hinted at it, but one of the things we try to be, again, very conscientious of is leaning into the challenges that are presented to us. Making whiskey in a climate where, so for the past 4 weeks, we've been over 103 every single day. That is a lot more different. That's a lot different than making it in the Mid-Atlantic and making it in the Ohio Valley, making it in Scotland. And so we've chosen a yeast strain that is very specifically, one, focused on consuming all the sugars that are going to be produced in a 100% malt base, but also can handle really aggressive temperatures. We're not doing a balcones. We're not letting like a natural rise up to 95. But when people come on tours, we pitch at 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're first 24 hours are going to be at 85, and then we actually knock that down to 80. Our attenuation is done in 3 or 4 days. And so what we're doing is we're creating these really big ester bomb beers. Yeah. If you taste that beer before it goes into the still, really similar to a Hefeweizen. It is, again, you get those banana notes, you get kind of some of those mango and those tropical fruit notes coming through. And we're really trying to lean into that because having that warmer fermentation creates that. Doing the double copper pot makes sure that we push those flavors and those esters and those congeners through. And then doing a shorter aging in a small format, once you interact with that medium plus toast and that number 3, it just underlines it, it deepens it. And then you start to get even maybe some like stone fruit coming through on it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely hear you on those things. And so you've mentioned the quarter cask a few times, right? So for those who don't know, quarter cask, you're going to get a lot of surface area touching. It is a great way for smaller distilleries to get more whiskey and maturing quicker, but also for people like yourselves in hotter climates to adapt to that, to get it out. Limestone Branch uses quarter cask still to do some private select stuff, and they put it in a tanker, right? Holding bin where it's just metal, right? So you still have pretty decent sized distilleries, utilizing that methodology. But for you all, what's an average age look like? Or are you all just pooling based upon flavor profile at that point for, what you're looking for and what your consumers are looking for?
Yeah, I always give that obnoxious answer. People ask how long we age, and I always say until it's ready.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, so we start doing sensory for our core products. So the Classic and the Dorado, we start doing sensory at 10 months. Our average is 12. The longest we're going to let that roll is about 15. Yeah. One of the things is, again, you have that advantage that you have more surface area, so you have that accelerated extraction. That also means you have to pay insanely close attention to the aging process of it because it is incredibly easy to over oak. It's a matter of days. It can be, this is delicious. Now we just have something that tastes like permanent marker.
Yeah.
We're also conscientious so we also make very narrow hearts cuts. When you go into a 53, as you guys know, you want kind of some fattier cuts. You want some of those more volatile things coming off in the heads and some of those heavier oils coming off in the tails because they're gonna esterify, they're gonna oxygenate over time. We don't have that. We really don't have that luxury if we're going into the 15. With going into a 15, so I've always kind of bristled at that idea of the heart of the hearts, just smacks of marketing, but we do make very narrow cuts because we still want that grain profile to come through a little bit. And if we were to make those wider, more traditional cuts, you're going to get a fusily off balance, over-aged product if you're going into those smaller barrels.
Yeah. Speaking of that, right, that ties into the larger business scale question. So if you're taking narrower cuts, what are you doing with your heads and tails? Are you running that as clear spirits? Or are you all doing something else to make sure that, it's a viable business, thing? Because the narrower the cuts, the narrower, the profitability of the whiskey.
Oh, yeah. And I will always tell people the way we do it is one of the most inefficient ways you can decide to produce whiskey. So our heads we'll hang on to and we'll utilize either as a cleaner or, if we have a lot on hand, we will proof it down and that goes down the drain. We do hang on to our tails, though. Our tails do end up going back either if we've got a really interesting run, if we're tasting through the spirit run and we've got something that we think is just a little bit more complex, a little bit more interesting, we will hang on to those and put those in a separate faints tank. Yeah. And we will occasionally do a faints run. Most of the time, those tails are going back into our low wines. So we can extract some more ethanol and get a little more of those interesting notes. Yeah. We tend to get pretty high yield beers. We're averaging 10.5, 11% beer once it's finished. Yeah. So even with a double copper pot, we're getting these nice big kind of chunky spirit runs. And it also leans more to that brasher flavor profile that we kind of focus on. I will always say we are a much more in your face whiskey. But that is, again, leaning into that idea of creating a whiskey that is of its place. But yeah, narrower cuts means we're getting fewer new make going into oak. Utilizing smaller barrels means we're using up way more floor space. And unfortunately, barrels don't scale in cost. Yeah. Like you're looking at just shy of $300 for a 15-gallon barrel, versus $325 for a 53. So yeah. And we did a lot, and it came from that need. We did it because that's what a lot of craft distilleries were doing. You can get a faster extraction, you can get an aged spirit onto the market quicker. But as we learned how to tweak those processes, that kind of became the distinctive style. And so we'll occasionally lay down a 53-gallon barrel, but I don't see us ever getting away from utilizing the small format because it has become such an integral part of what makes Whiskey Del Bac taste like Whiskey Del Bac.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question is, have you laid down 53s? Because it'd be really interesting to see what that's like, because you could run a wider cut on those barrels. And the other question I had from this goes into aging, some people like in Texas, they've gone underground, they've been able to try to, create humid environments where it's cooler, right? In those opportunities, what type of aging process are you having? Are these in an open warehouse? Are they, palletized? How are you all looking at that?
We do palletized open warehouse. Yeah. And, we've had people in the past who've come in and they're like, they look at our angel share. They're like, this is awful. You guys need to be offering some sort of humidity control. You need to be doing some sort of temperature control. And again, one of those, we don't do it because it's easy. We do it because it creates something unique. So thank God we have swamp coolers in the production space, because right now it would be impossible to work in there. But that really keeps the temperatures in production around 85 degrees. Now that it's humid and the swamp coolers don't work, we're pushing into that 90-degree range. So you're still seeing these incredibly warm aging specs. And then what's interesting about aging in the desert as well is you still have these warmer winters, but it gets cold. So in the middle of the winter, I can get up, I can go out to my truck and there's frost on the window. And by the time I'm going home, it's 80 degrees. Yeah. And so one, we want to make sure, obviously, we're keeping the staff safe. We want to make sure that we can provide a safe working environment, but we really do little to no temperature control, humidity control within the aging space. We do positive airflow. We want to make sure that we're still getting that oxygen interacting with the oak. One thing you have to be very conscientious of when you do palletized aging is you're not getting as much interaction. So we pretty much always have air moving over the top of them, but that's really about all we're doing in terms of controlling what's going on with the aging.
That's interesting. It's really interesting.
I was going to say, it seems like a constant fight with where you're at.
It is. It's so interesting because, you can't take a traditional thought process to producing whiskey when you're in the desert and if you're going to lean into, again, the challenges. So as I had mentioned earlier, my wife and I came here from Maryland. So, we were mid-Atlantic. And so high humidity, high temp, but not a lot of temperature fluctuation. So you're doing more traditional whiskey production. I started distilling in my hometown of Dodge City, Kansas. I helped open Boot Hill Distillery. Very dry, very warm, much more akin to the Sonoran Desert. And so, but you still had those traditional production methods. And with both of those distilleries, we were producing bourbon. When I came into Whiskey Del Bac, it was almost like relearning. Stephen and the team had created such a distinctive way of doing it that you would have these conversations and be like, well, this is how we used to do it at X, or this is more the traditional way. And then you try to do that and it doesn't work. It doesn't produce a high quality product, or it produces something that is just maybe not bad, but not as accessible as you want. And so by being able to, again, I always say lean in, like that's kind of what we try to do is, these are huge challenges. There are a lot of disadvantages to it, but when you're taking advantage of what that presents to you, you can create something that is incredibly distinctive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that gets into terroir, right? Like, and we've asked this question, I don't know, we've probably had 15, 16 American single malt distilleries on by now. I mean, it's been quite a bit. Pretty much anyone in the commission, like feel like we've talked to at this point. And, one of the things that's really interesting is, you hear, even in the commission, you hear interesting kind of fights or inroads about that. And America's so weird because we just talked to McCarthy's 2 weeks ago. We had Caitlin on, and it's like, the Pacific Northwest, McCarthy's is kind of leads this thing, American Single Malt. And you're like, well, that's peated. But there's really nothing else peated up there. And then you go down to the Southwest and you have like the closest thing to peat, like in these mesquite smoked, flavors. And you're like, well, the terroir's not lining up. And so like, you have Scotland and everyone's got their space. In America, it's like, this is my state. I have my space in the terroir of that space. Versus like, hey, this is the whole country. You need to pigeonhole us in certain spots, which I think is very interesting.
It's one of the reasons I absolutely fell in love with the entire section of American Single Malt. Like, coming from a bourbon background and producing bourbon, like I still love bourbon, but you still kind of fit within this standard flavor profile that you come to expect from a bourbon whiskey. But there's 4 ingredients in American Single Malt. You have malted barley, yeast, water, the barrel. But within those 4, you have this infinite palette that you can paint with. You can use different malt styles. You can use different yeast strains. You can change how you're aging it. And so to me, I think that's one of the amazing things about the American Single Malt section is, okay, you've maybe tasted Whiskey Del Bac and you don't like us. Well, try McCarthy's, try Westland, try Andalusia, try Virginia, because they're going to be very distinct differences, but still under this umbrella of the American Single Malt. And, not to get all like rah, but how American is that? To be like, yes, we've taken this traditional whiskey style and we've basically said, we're going to do whatever we can to make something unique, interesting, and that is distinctive to us.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think people need to understand that. It's like, for the longest time, people are like, oh, well, all bourbon has to be made in Kentucky, right? Well, no. All American Single Malt doesn't have to be made in a certain place either, right? It is uniquely American spirit that has, traditions that we may or may not have robbed, but added some of our own characteristics to it along the way, which is great. And kind of moving along, right? So you teased that there's two kind of classic portfolios that you all have. So you have the classic, obviously, and then is it Dorado? Am I saying that?
Dorado,
correct? Okay.
yes.
Scott, your R looked like an L. That's why I had to guess at that.
So how would you pronounce that? Dorado?
Dorado, and I didn't want to say that, and so I thought I heard Dorado, so I wanted to make sure we were good. So
El Dorado.
Tell us a little bit about this whiskey and what makes this different from the classic.
Yeah, so Dorado is kind of what we see as our flagship. It is the most popular of our core line that we put out, and it is the brainchild. Dorado is what Stephen set out to create. This is our mesquite smoked American Single Malt. Again, we do the malting in house. We use velvet mesquite, which is the indigenous species of mesquite that you get here in Baja, Arizona. And we actually have this very kind of funky, it is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's a custom malt system that was built by Stephen and the original engineers who helped us go into our current production space. Because as you know, floor malting takes up a lot of space. And in craft production, you have to maximize every single bit of floor space you have. So we have basically a modified mash tun that functions as our floor malting system. We can malt 5,000 pounds at a time. Takes about 7 days for the full process. But then on the fourth day, while we've still got a little bit of moisture, germination is just about where we want it, we smoke it with mesquite smoke. We have this very interesting, it basically looks like a big barbecue smoke box that we then pump that smoke from that through the false bottom in our germination and kilning tank. And that creates this very distinctive, if you're not careful, very aggressive mesquite note. For people who have never had mesquite, it's always really difficult to explain to them what it tastes like. Because, when you hear peat, you think you hear iodine, you hear, kind of that meaty kind of
dirt.
I always get like dirt, tire fire. And
Briny,
mesquite is mesquite. Like mesquite is its own flavor profile. If you've had a lot of barbecue, in particular Texas barbecue, you're familiar with it, but it's so distinctive and it's sweeter than peat. That was one thing that's interesting because Stephen himself will fully admit he's not a big fan of smoked whiskeys. So when they started playing around with that, he was pleased to find that mesquite lends almost kind of a honeyed note to it. And so we've tweaked the recipe over the years. Dorado used to be, again, you've had some of the Lost Lantern releases, which is our unblended mesquite smoked product. We do add a little bit of classic in with our Dorado. We have actually pulled the smoke back over the years. It was one of the pieces of feedback we got a lot of was, hey, this is really interesting, but if you're not careful with mesquite, it gets really spiky. You get a lot of astringency on it. You get a lot of just heat that goes across your mid to back palate. And so our Dorado, what we call our MS, our mesquite smoked, starts with a base of 60% unsmoked malted barley, 40% mesquite smoked. That is then aged by itself. And then when we're ready for our Dorado, that's going to get blended in with a little bit of that classic, again, to kind of lend some of that sweetness that's present in the classic, but still let that smoke kind of come through. And as we've changed that, we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback that, hey, this is a lot more accessible. This is a lot more interesting. This can stand up in a cocktail. But then we also still have those people that remember the good old days of the 100% mesquite smoked. And that's where we have things like our Ode to Isla, which is a limited release that comes out every winter. Our Distiller's cuts will occasionally lean into those. Adam and Nora at Lost Lantern have picked up some of our better, very heavy smoked ones and created some just really amazing blends with them. Yeah.
No, it's definitely interesting. And I would agree. The sweetness on this is what helps me a ton. And I really like the sweetness, that sweet smoke on the palate leans to like maple, right? You're getting those traditional barbecue notes. And there's this really nice, like candied nut, like those Christmas nuts, like toasted pecan, wrapped in like cinnamon sugar and all the stuff that, puts fat on your hips. that you shouldn't eat too many things of them. I get that note a lot, which is really nice. And the sweet smoke kind of carries throughout the palate. But it does, you can tell it zaps. Like the moment it hit my front palate, it was like, whoop, all the way to the back. Scott, we're not much of smoky drinkers. How's this kind of hitting your palate? I mean, it's really nice. It's a nice whiskey.
Yeah. I was expecting a lot more smoke on the nose, but now that you've kind of explained it, now I kind of see why it's kind of layered underneath until you really taste it. And then it does just kind of fall across your tongue. And then you're like, there's the smoke. Okay. But I mean, to me, I get like a lot of like dark chocolate on the nose, like chocolate notes. But then when I go to the palate, it's like tobacco and mint to me, like big time.
Yeah, tobacco is a big one. That's a note that a lot of people get. To me, what I like about it is, in general, I tend to be a big believer in whiskeys by themselves should be adventures. You should have a layered experience when you're sipping on a good whiskey, that you're going to get multiple things coming across. And I think Dorado comes through in spades on that, because like you say, on the nose, you're like, well, maybe I get a little bit of hint of that smoke, and then you taste that. And then to me, it's that sweet right up front. Like you say, that zap that goes through, and then the smoke is what lingers. Like on the breath out, the longer I sit with it, that finish to me is where that smoke really builds and just kind of sets up shop and hangs out for a little while.
Yeah. It's almost like a good meal. Like you enjoy it while you're tasting it, but then it just it does stick with you for a little while. But it's not overwhelming.
No.
I mean, like I had to go, since we were talking about it, I had to pour McCarthy's because I had the bottle sitting right over here just to compare the two. And it's just like you just get a rush of smoke on the nose with the McCarthy's, but then like the Dorado, if you're expecting the smoke, you're kind of like surprised. You're like, well, where is it? Like you're looking for it. Then you're like, okay, let's just dive into the whiskey and start drinking it, because that's the most important part anyways, right? But
you wouldn't be scared to drink this, right? That's what I would tell a whiskey drinker. Like you start with the classic. Hey, you're going to get some of this, but be ready for, going into a pit barbecue place where you're smelling the smoker going. Like that's kind of what you're getting. You taste the smoke on the meat. Like it's that bark, right? That comes from the meat. Like that's how I would describe this. So you wouldn't scare someone away. Now I jumped ahead a little bit while y'all were talking, and I poured Frontera. So we're getting into like, I guess, special releases here, is right. my guess on this, because I have no context whatsoever on what this is, but it's a finished single malt port.
Correct.
Port is my guess. Sherry.
Pedro Jimenez sherry.
That was my second guess. So I was in the realm of closeness there. But like whatever's in this, the nose is my jam.
I thought you were gonna say this shit right here.
This shit right here. This shit good. Because like this is like big red wine to me. And like with that vanilla undertone, and I'm like, oh, I like talking about the normal stuff, but this, I like talking about a little bit more. I like this. So what's going on with Frontera?
Yeah. So obviously with your core stuff, you want to have a really good, solid, excellent, accessible whiskey. You want something that's going to go into cocktail. Someone feels comfortable pouring it for a nice dram in the evening. We have what we call our Distiller's Cut series, and we'll get into that, tease in a little bit, but those are super limited. Our Distiller's Cuts are a couple of 100 bottles. It is a way for the production team to kind of stretch our legs, be creative, find ways to be super esoteric and just go out on limbs. But as those became more popular, as people knew more about them, we started getting that question, well, how come I can't get this? And so about 2 years ago, we actually sat down and we looked at what our most popular Distiller's Cuts had been in the past. And we're like, okay, we know people like these. We were really proud of them. We really thought they were great. How can we find a way to scale them? And of course, PX Sherry. Come on, PX Sherry finished whiskey. That's peanut butter and jelly. Like that that just goes together. And so we got our hands on a couple of PX Sherry Botas. So the big casks. And yeah, we laid our classic down in them. And that's what became our Frontera. So that starts with the basic of the unsmoked classic. And then we will lay down at 110 proof for our finishing. And depending on when it's ready, we'll pull those and we'll blend those together to create Frontera. We have some first use, we have some fourth use, and we even have a seventh use. And so we've kind of staggered those because I was actually just listening to Murphy's Cedar Ridge, to his interview. And I think he specifically said that he's a big believer that in finishing, you need to get that finish. And I'm a big believer in you can overfinish. And now I don't think Murphy has ever overfinished. In fact, the Quintessential is one of my hands down favorite American single malts. But we try to be very, very delicate and try to take a lighter hand with our finishing process, because to me, I still want to get that base spirit in there, and I want to use that finish to accentuate it, to find things that complement it. And because PX Sherry has that walnut, that raisin, that heavy, syrupy sweet, to me, like from not tasting it, my mind would go, well, our classic's already very heavy and it's already very sweet. Like that's just going to create a syrup bomb, but it elevates it. You get that little bit of acidity that's coming through on the sherry that cuts through some of those sweeter notes of the classic. And so this is a limited special release. It's part of what we call our global cask collection. This comes out every spring. The one we have coming up that comes out every summer is our Normandy. That is our classic that is finished in Calvados barrels. Right. So yeah, that's between the three of us and everyone listening. Normandy is my favorite thing that we make. So I'm always excited because we're about to start blending it. So that makes me very happy, but super proud of the Frontera. This just got a 93 in Whiskey Advocate, and we just brought home a bunch of golds with it. And yeah, it's beautiful. Like if you look at the color of it, it's just this deep, beautiful mahogany. And yeah,
am I mistaken? Like looking back at the bottles here, is the classic likely a little bit darker than the Dorado? Am I seeing that correctly?
And that could be a behavior of how we blend. So we always blend for flavor. We don't really blend for color, and we never use any sort of caramel coloring, anything for consistency. So you will get some variation in the color of our core products.
I mean, color's not everything, but
right.
You do sometimes approach things with your eyes. But yeah, I'm looking at these bottles and I'm like, okay, the Frontera, that is a nice, like, rich amber red color. Mm-hmm. But then like looking at the other two side by side, I'm like, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe my eyes are deceiving me. But to me, the nose on the Frontera makes me want to immediately jump into the whiskey because it smells like melted caramel, like Werther's original candies. I'm just like, I have to taste that whiskey now because it just smells incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's what got me was the nose. I mean, the nose, you had me at a low when I smelled that thing. And like, not only would I like this neat, what's the proof on this?
This is 97, so we're at 48.5% ABV.
So not only would I like this neat, because I just loved it neat, I would love to try this in an old fashioned, because I think like just the right bitter would elevate it. The right, the citrus I think would put it over the top, because you do get a little lemon peel in there, but like you need a little bit more citrus bump, and you garnish this with go fig instead of like Luxardo, and I think you have a hell of an elevated old fashioned. And now I'm going to call Bob, our Cocktails with Friend podcast maker, and have him make me a fig old fashioned with Frontera.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it does. And if you want to have that on your tasting menu, just it's all good. You don't have to quote me. You can just say Bourbon Lens approved at the end of the cocktail.
Do we have an official logo we can slap
we can.
on it?
We can send that to you.
So you said the Frontera is a seasonal release. Is it
Correct.
Always sherry, or does it vary?
It is always sherry.
Okay.
So the Frontera will always be PX sherry. The Normandy will always be Calvados. The third in that series I kind of touched on is what we call our Ode to Isla. That is a throwback to kind of the OG Dorado. That is our big smoke bomb. Very, either you love it or you hate it. I mean, it is very much if I'm here for it, I'm here for it. That one does vary from year to year. We've done bourbon finishes in that. We've done rye finishes. Sometimes we've just done straight out of the cask into it. It used to be called our winter release. But again, we wanted something that we could kind of show off how well the stuff plays with finishes, scale it, because, that's always the big concern is because we've done some amazing distillers cuts that I would love to get into the hands of more people, but they tend to be very esoteric barrels. They're not, I'm not going to be able to get a steady hand on, say, like the Pinot de Charence cask that I love so much. So always PX Sherry on the Frontera, always Calvados on the Normandy.
And then are you proofing batch specific, or is proof around the 90, I think the 97 on the Frontera?
So both the Normandy and the Frontera are the 97. The Ode to Isla tends to hang out around 110. Okay. That was one. Originally, we always did it cask strength, but I always like to play with those knobs. Let's tweak this lever.
Don't do it just to say you did it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so every year when we have our blend, we'll go through and we will check the proofs. And if it's better at a lower proof, that's what it's going to go in at. And there are some times it comes straight out of that barrel and you're like, yeah, this is exactly where we want it to be. This is how we want it to be perceived. I will forever beat the drum of the best way to drink whiskey is how you want to drink it. I will admit I've kind of come around on cask strength stuff for a long time. I didn't get it. I always was like, well, you're just doing it to be so, oh my gosh, check it out. It's cask strength. And for me, I want to see what the distiller thinks is the best. Let me, I'm going to put my experience into your hands as the expert. And so to me, just defaulting to cask strength, I'm not a huge fan of that. Like sometimes it is right where it needs to be and it is perfect and on the money. But sometimes it's a little bit cooler depending on how much it is, but we want it to be that magic spot. We want you to pour that glass and go, yeah, I can dive into this as is.
Sorry, I took a break to look at the website and find out more information on the whiskey I was drinking. Since Scott provided me a 0 on my bottles.
That's the fun part, right?
Yes, it makes me go.
I could have just put numbers or letters, and
that'd been interesting. I could have blind tasted these. That'd have been rough for me.
I think you probably would have started on the wrong end of the spectrum, and then you're like, oh,
yeah, I would have. It'd have been interesting. Okay, so you've teased this a little bit. Good job. You have a future in podcasting or show hosting. The tease, right? This is, after the 15th commercial.
Theater kids.
Yeah,
so
after the 15th commercial, the payoff is here. We have no commercials on this podcast, just as an FYI. So we finish with the distiller's cut. So I looked this up. This is a pretty hefty blend of stuff happening in this. So
yes.
Again, these are labor of loves. That's what I'll call this, because you have the heart of hearts in your whiskey. The distiller's cuts, I've read about 3 of them. They are labors of love. It's not just like, hey, this is going into a barrel and it's finished and it's done. This is we're mingling here, we're mingling there, we're blending here, we're going to do a little extra aging here, and then we're going to blend back together, and this is what you get. So I just gave you a synopsis, but unpack this one a little bit.
Yeah. So what we're sipping on is our spring 2024 distiller's cut. So as I had mentioned, we're proud of the work we do. Distilling's factory work. I mean, you show up, you're doing the same thing every single day. You're focusing on consistency, especially when you're small. Craft distillery, you want to be consistent so people know what they're going to get every time. That can get tedious sometimes. So the distiller's cuts are ways for myself and the production team to really just be like, what if we did this? And so as we come across unique barrels, as we get our hands on different malt profiles, even playing around with yeast, these are ways we can do something that just really lets us stretch our legs out and create something unique. And sometimes it has been as simple as like, this is a Madeira finish. Sometimes it's as simple as, this is just a couple of different really nice barrels we liked blended together. I have a background in journalism, newspapers, rest in peace. And
no, not if you want to pay $1 a month.
And when in the press room, as you used these huge rolls of paper to print, you would end up with rolls of paper that you couldn't really do much with. We called these dinkies. I always liked that term. And so in distilling, like say maybe I have a single barrel of something or even a half barrel of something that it is not enough to go by itself. I call those dinkies. Those are our dinky barrels. Like, well, we need to find something to do with these. And so that was kind of the impetus for this year's spring distillers cut was we had a bunch of one-off barrels. We had a bunch of things kind of laying around. I've jokingly referred to it as our hobo chili blend. It is, it's just kind of a little bit of everything that we had sitting around. So we had some of our unsmoked that had been finishing in cognac for about 2 years. And it was interesting, but it couldn't stand up by itself. You would pull those samples and you're like, no, this is fine. But with the distiller's cuts, you want to wow, like you want to be able to have something again, like going back to that idea of a whiskey telling a story and creating these nuances. And so we utilized the cognac as kind of the backbone of the blend. That was about 60% of this blend. And then we actually had a little bit of a rum agricole finish. So you get some grassiness, some black pepper. We had some PX sherry finish that we hadn't used in the last Frontera. And I also had one barrel that I really, really liked. There was just this very interesting, complex barrel that I was like, okay, we need to do something with this. So we took the cognac, we took the PX sherry, we took the rum agricole, we took this lone single barrel, blended it together, let it marry for a little over a month. And then we took that and then we did a secondary finishing in that original cognac barrel and a Calvados barrel. We let that sit for another month. Pulled those two secondary finishes out, let that marry for another month after that. And then that is what went into the bottle.
Like I said, they took a little bit of this, they took a little bit of that, they sprinkled some sugar on it, they made the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah,
exactly.
the chef's kiss. That's so when you're doing that, are you doing that on ultra small scale? Like a couple ounces and you're like making a mini batch? I know you're already dealing with like your dinky barrels on a smaller scale to begin with, but you don't want to really screw those up.
Right.
So you're doing like 1 or 2 ounces here and there.
So we'll typically do 100 milliliter blend at a time. It is it's a fun process because it starts out as a very singular kind of solo process of you as the blender sitting down with these different barrels. And I'm a big believer in we need to know what this is going to be like the moment we blend it. So we will pull those samples around the time we think we're going to do the blend because I want to know exactly what I'm getting out of it. And you'll go through and you'll analyze each of those barrels by yourself. And then typically so it's myself, Dustin, our lead distiller, and Abby, our production distiller, will go through separately and be like, here's things we like. Here's things we think are very interesting. And then each of us will kind of come up with our own blend. And again, you don't want to waste those, especially with how, I call us small but mighty. We're producing a relatively large volume, but we don't have the luxury of having 40 finishing barrels sitting back there that we can play with. And so we'll typically do on a 100 mil scale and we'll do proportions. So it'll be like a 2 to 1 to 1 or 3 to 4 to half. And we'll do those blends, we'll sample the blend, and then we'll let it sit for a week. And then we'll come back and analyze it. Big believer in letting things have time to really kind of sit and marry, because we've had times we've done a blend and the moment we blend it, we're like, this is amazing. Like, this is outstanding. And then you come back to it a month later and you're like, wow, this sucks. Like something that wasn't taking center stage has now moved forward, or what you thought you were going to get as your dominant note has now completely disappeared, because as you have kind of those jagged edges of those more volatile organoleptic bonds in there, they're going to change and they're going to evolve. And just because something's good immediately doesn't mean it's going to be good in the end. And then typically once we've hit upon something that I'm a big believer in product by democracy. One of the nice things about being head distiller is having final say, but I'm not infallible. My palate could be off for the day. I could be getting a head cold and not realizing it. And so typically what we will do is we will develop something that we really like. We're like, okay, we think this is good. And then we will shop it. We'll let everyone else within the distillery taste it. We'll let some of the trusted people within the Tucson and Phoenix market try it. And we get enough sign-offs on it. And we're like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And then sometimes we just go, well, we don't care what you're saying. We think this is really amazing. So we're going to bottle it.
It's our whiskey. We're going to do what we want.
Exactly.
And I've got a metaphor. So like when you have these single dinkies, when they mingle, they could make a good blend. But you have to marry them to really find out if they're good enough.
Or as I've experienced a lot in the past couple weeks of summer with two kids, at home more than not. The siblings are fighting.
Yeah,
yes.
Maybe they'll get along after a few days together, but yeah, you gotta kind of play that happy balance. Like, are they going to get along, or are they just going to fight the whole time?
Facts. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. This has been a really great tasting, because I was coming in and thinking I'm going to get mesquite all day, and I've been pleasantly surprised at the wide range and flavors of Whiskey Del Bac, which I'm super happy. Adam and Nora, I have a bone to pick with you. You need to be picking some of their classic whiskey. That will be to talk about later, because I think this is what you get people in on the classic, then we kick them to the Dorado. Dorado. I read the L again. Dorado. We got to kick them over there. I'm blaming Scott's lefty on this.
I don't think it's my handwriting. I think it's your lisp.
All right, here we go. He can see. Does that look like an L or an R?
Well, hook on the top there.
Yeah, Lefty McGee, get out of here. So at the end of the day, this has been a great test. This has been a great tasting. I've enjoyed it. So the question is, for the people, can you tell them, Mark, where they can find out more about Whiskey Del Bac so they can go buy a bottle? I would strongly suggest buying the Frontera, my personal preference, but teaches their own.
So if you want to find out more about us, visit us at whiskeydelbac.com. We're on the usual suspects of social media, Instagram, Facebook. We technically have a TikTok, but I can't tell you the last time it's been updated. No Twitter or X, but and you can sign up for our newsletter. That's usually the best way to kind of figure out what's going on. We are very active on Instagram. So and you can, if you go to our website, you can see where we're available. We are currently distributed in, want to say 24, 25 states. Bulk of our business obviously is in Arizona. Arizona loves us, which is great. Followed by California, and then New York, actually.
Wow.
Yes, the state of New York, the Empire State, has been very good to us. But you can also order us we're fulfilled through Big Thirst. But if you go to our website, I want to say they shipped about 43 states. So if you're listening, there is a very good chance you can probably get your hands on us. If not, let us know where you are, and we are happy to have that conversation.
I just looked at our listenership. We have quite a following in South Korea. You there?
we are not exporting yet, which is kind of a shame because we've had a lot of interest in it.
Well, if you're interested, Bourbon Lens is really high up in the South Korean podcasting world. So happy to help you there where we can.
I'm sure Big Thirst will get there eventually.
Yeah, we'll tell them that South Korea
trajectory.
Yeah. Also, I was looking. Can you tell people about the whiskey club that you all have on the website?
Yeah, so our whiskey club is really the only way you can get access to our distillers cuts. There's a couple of different options. You can do a 1-bottle subscription, which means that you sign up, you pay at the start of the year, and you get 1 bottle of our spring, 1 bottle of our summer, 1 bottle of our fall. To tease it, we just blended it today. The summer is actually going to be a bottled in bond of our classic.
Hey now.
Yeah.
Spoke Scots language.
We are still playing around with what our fall is. The fall tends to lean towards the smoke. Makes sense. We've got that changing of the seasons. We're looking at something a little bit heavier. So that's our whiskey club. There is also one which we love, which is you can sign up and you can get 3 bottles of each of those releases. And there's a lot of fun little extras that come with it. You get discounts, you get invites to special events that we host at the distillery. Eventually, we'd like to be able to do that kind of more offsite in different states, things like that. Again, we're a small team, so we're doing what we can. As of right now, the club's only available in Arizona, but we are working with our online retail partners to make it open to as many people who can have booze shipped to them.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
but yeah, we like to keep those to
there.
ourselves.
Yeah. More to come on that for sure. If you're outside of Arizona, I know I've done it with High West. I've really enjoyed it. So hopefully you all can make that happen, because getting a special delivery in your home front door is always exciting, especially when you all have new and exciting blends for people to try. So I'm excited. Scott, I know. How pumped are you about the bottle and bond? I know we might not get our hands on it, but I'm excited for them to have a bottled and bond product.
No, I mean, that's awesome. I mean, 4 years of.
Well, so we hinted at the 53s. That is one of our 53-gallon experiments.
There you go.
Those 53s were laid down in the spring of 2020.
Wow.
So
COVID time.
So yeah, we're very, very excited for it. That was a fun one. While we were sampling through it, we're like, well, we have this handful of barrels. What are we going to do with it? Because it tastes close enough to classic. You can tell it's classic, but it doesn't taste close enough to classic to go into a bottle as classic. Like, well, bottled in bond, and it's interesting. Like if you're a big Whiskey Del Bac fan, if you like classic, I highly recommend. It's only gonna be about 500 bottles, a super limited run. So
what's that, like two barrels, I guess?
Yeah, they're about our angel share is abysmal. We first year we average 13 to 15%, and then it's not much better after that. So those barrels were not quite half empty, but getting pretty close to it.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty cool. For you all to do a craft experiment like bottled and bond's pretty damn awesome. So kudos to you all. 13 years in, you all have got 13 plus more years to go to continue to do some great things. And Mark, we appreciate you joining us tonight. I know it's 10 o'clock Eastern time. It's 7. I don't know. Arizona's weird. I don't know if it's 7 or 8.
Yeah, we don't do the whole time change. We're technically West Coast time now. Yeah, we're at 7:15.
All right, there we go. So you're at dinner time. I'm at bedtime. Scott's at I'm going to edit podcast time. So we'll let you go, but we appreciate you joining us tonight, and thank you for having stick-to-itiveness to see this podcast through. We really appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed it. So Scott, thanks for getting me samples, and thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. And until next time, cheers.
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 Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed, because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.